I never cut weight in wrestling except my freshman year in high school. After that, I said, there's no more cutting weight. So I wrestled 190 at Nebraska, and I literally weighed 190. I would literally show up to weigh-ins with a Snickers bar and a Coke, and I would just torment the lightweight guys. I'd be standing behind the scale with my Snickers bar and my Coke, and they hated me. They hated me for it.
This is the Full Tilt Podcast with Hatch.
All right. I think we're ready. Sounds good?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Bill Scherr.
Hey.
How are we doing? How are we doing?
I'm doing great.
Oh, I'm doing wonderful now. It was funny because how this one organically came about. I mean, shoot, I start this podcast and then 3-4 weeks down the road, we start getting some social media presence and start getting some things going. And then I got this guy commenting on our post. So I'm like, William Scherr, is that can't be the one?
That guy used to wrestle.
Wait a second, I think he used to wrestle. So it's funny. So that's when I immediately message you and say, hey, thanks for comment and thank you for everything.
No, my pleasure.
And by the way, since you are a legend,
I've enjoyed the little podcast snippets that you have on social media. It's interesting, great.
Yeah, my guy's crushing it. He's good. Now, like I said, this has just been a really fun project of mine. Just
awesome.
We got so many cool people in wrestling. You might as well bring them out, and so it's pretty good. So,
but why did you select me then?
Well, I tell you what, if there's a cool factor, man, you're like a 10 out of 10. I mean, because most wrestlers stay in their domain, whereas you kind of not only excelled in the wrestling domain, but man, you've excelled in all domains.
Well, thank you.
So it's been pretty. I've been really super excited to talk with you, but especially just knowing how big of an icon you've been in the sport, and also, just all the different things and different stories we're going to get into. And heck, I might be standing next to you in Chicago. Who knows?
Yeah, hey, I've got all day. So
there we go. But we'll get back to your South Dakota roots. I mean, you grew up South Dakota, that's where it all started.
I'll tell you, literally Little House on the Prairie. Lower Ingalls Wilder. Those books were written in South Dakota, by the way, so people
kidding.
know. Yep, and that's what growing up there was like. We were a very small town, 10 brothers and sisters in the house.
Oh wow!
And people have asked, well, how did you get into wrestling? And we had 6 boys in one room in 3 sets of bunk beds. So we wrestled, just to survive in that household. So that's
I feel like I'm talking to Nate Carr again.
That's literally how we got into it. But it was a very supportive community for wrestling, and there were a lot of great influences in that community and in the state and South Dakota's got great wrestling. For people who don't know, they should know by now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's Mobridge, South Dakota, is that right?
Yep, Mobridge, right in the Missouri. It's a railroad abbreviation. They had a railroad station there back in the, when the town was founded, and it's short for Missouri River Bridge, Mobridge. Mm-hmm. Wow. It's right on the Missouri River. Beautiful community.
Yeah, so it's probably, per rural, obviously, really like farming, rodeo type of area.
My dad was a truck driver. We grew up working for ranchers and farmers, and very rural.
Okay, so that explains the strength.
Well, I'll tell you, we loaded thousands and thousands of bales every summer.
Yeah.
From morning until dark. We were out there in the hayfields working. We prayed for rain a lot of days because if it wasn't raining, we were out in that hayfield.
Yeah, I know. I grew up in Iowa, so baling hay wasn't. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, more than the city, so I didn't do a whole lot of that until I took my first wrestling coaching job at Durant. I went and baled hay with some of my wrestlers one time, and I was like, man,
that's Colorado, right?
No, in Durant, Iowa.
Oh, in Durant, Iowa.
Durant,
okay.
Iowa. Yep, in eastern Iowa, and I was like. Yeah, I'm glad I did. I'm glad this wasn't.
Yeah,
this
it's
wasn't
definitely
part of my
great training for wrestling.
Yeah,
I posted something on the internet said if you want to build a good wrestler, put them out in a hayfield all day, for their entire youth, and you're going to get great balance and great hand strength and great back and leg strength, and it's awesome.
It is like those farm kids. They just, it's such a different. Really mentality and a lifestyle when they grow up, because I know again I grew up more in the city. We grew up in a small town, but in the city of Cedar Rapids is kind of where we started going to high school. And when I first started coaching, my first job after I graduated in Iowa was in Durant, Iowa, in a small town in eastern Iowa, like I was saying. Really, really small community. And I would have kids that would literally get up at 4 in the morning, because we'd have practice in the morning at 6. Yep. They get up at 4, do their chores, come to practice at 6, go to school all day, after school, we'd go to practice and they'd go home and do their homework, and it was just the way it worked.
Yeah, that's the thing you're getting when you have a farm kid or ranch kid in one of your sports programs. They know how to work because they're doing chores and working all day long for their parents. I mean, when we started football in high school, we were doing 2-a-days in the preseason. We would go load bales between the 2-a-day practices. I mean, you just worked. That's what you did.
Yeah. So I'm sure you attribute that to a large part of your success.
No question. Yeah, that strength that you build up in your grip and your core body strength from doing ranch and farm work, particularly bales, is incredible.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty impressive. South Dakota wrestling, you were talking about, as far as having good wrestling there. There's another South Dakota legend that I had on my podcast in my second episode, Randy Lewis. You guys grew up together.
Yeah. Well, we were all inspired by Randy. Yeah. There's a whole generation of South Dakota wrestlers, and we can name them from me, my brother, to Mark Manning, and a bunch of other kids that came out of the state, Lincoln Malkaravy.
Yeah.
We all grew up idolizing the great one, Randy Lewis. I mean, there wasn't social media or anything back then, but we got amateur wrestling news. We got the Rapid City newspaper and the Sioux Falls newspaper, and we would just devour everything we could about Randy Lewis. And we knew how great he was, and we all idolized him. We wanted to be him. And he really gave all of the South Dakota kids, the belief that we could come out of South Dakota and wrestle at a big time level because he did it. And if we knew he did it, then we felt we could do it as well. So Randy, we all wrote Randy a ton of gratitude for everything that he did to pave the way for South Dakota wrestlers.
Yeah, he's got some interesting stories of himself back in the day, and he'll tell you how good he was. That's for sure.
He's not shy about that, but he was every bit as good as he says he was. And I'll tell you, the one there was on your podcast, there was a story about that dual meet in Rapid City.
Oh yeah, you were at that?
And yeah, we were from our perspective. We were on the other side of that. So my brother and I were selected to wrestle for the South Dakota team against a New Zealand cultural exchange team that wrestled a warm-up match for the Soviets before the Soviet-USA duel that night. So we wrestled against New Zealand, and then we got in the stands and watched USA versus Russia. And that was an eye-opening experience to see how great those guys were. But of course, we watched Randy pin Viktor Alexiev of Russia in that match. And I'll tell you, that's still to this day the most electric moment I've ever seen or had and experienced at a wrestling match.
Really?
When he pinned Alexiev, that arena went crazy. And we were, everybody was all there to watch Randy Lewis. I mean, we were watching Russia versus USA, but we were there to watch Randy. Right. And when he pinned Alexiev, it was unbelievable. The roof came off that place.
Wow, I couldn't believe. I mean, because he called the shot that night.
He called the shot. He was that good.
That was. I mean, and that's what's crazy because he was so good at such a young age, and now we're seeing this, this whole new wave of youngsters coming through and doing well not only on the national scene but the international scene. And people sometimes forget how good a Randy Lewis was and a Lee Kemp was and Jimmy Carr was back in those days.
Yeah, there were some guys that were good at an early age, but not as many as now. And if you look at what's happening now, I mean, these guys are trained well from an early age. They're exposed to wrestling technique, both at camps and with coaches all across the country. They have great private coaches. They're seeing stuff on videotape and social media that we never would have had an opportunity to see. And they're employing more professional coaching and training techniques, both from a physical nature, weightlifting and nutrition, et cetera. So, these kids are 16, 17, 18 years old coming out of school. They've been down a training path that we never would have started until we got into college. So of course they're better. And I'm just in awe of the current athletes out there today that are competing. They're great athletes. They're great wrestlers. They have great technique. It's fun to watch the sport progress over time. Right. It keeps getting better, which is great to see.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When you were coming through at those ages, I mean, what was your ways of getting better other than baling hay?
Well, we were fortunate to grow up in a community that had good support for wrestling. We had a coach, Rod Moon, and another coach, Terry Binger, who were enthusiastic about the sport. Weren't necessarily as knowledgeable about the sport, but they wanted us to get better, and they poured themselves into the sport. There's that old adage, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And we knew those guys cared about making us better. And then there were some people around town that we had a sports boosters club, a guy named Gene Monfort and others were behind that club. helping raise money to send us to tournaments and camps, et cetera. So the support of it, sometimes you hear this saying, sometimes it takes a village. Well, we had that in Mobridge. There were a lot of good kids that come out of that town that wrestled. And then in the state itself, we had a good core group of wrestlers. We knew Mark Manning when we were 9th and 10th graders.
Yeah.
And we wrestled on South Dakota teams together. There were other guys there, a guy named Nick Carantinos, Todd Ford from our own school, a guy named Bob Hirsch. They all went on to wrestle in college. Nick, I think, is in the Arizona Hall of Fame for wrestling coaching, as is Bob Hirsch in South Dakota. And then, of course, Mark Manning with his tremendous success at the University of Nebraska. There was a whole group of us that were just passionate about the sport. And we bonded, and then we moved on, but we stayed in touch, and we've all done well. And it was just that atmosphere in the state, started with Randy Lewis and carried on through all of us, that of success and of a passion for wrestling.
Well, you probably really like seeing Coach Manning then, you South Dakota guy, at your alma mater then.
Yeah, so Mark started at the University of Nebraska. He was a freshman the year. My brother and I were freshmen. He roomed with my brother his freshman year, and ended up moving on to Nebraska Omaha. But we had a lot of fun that freshman year. I think maybe if Mark had stayed at Nebraska, I think all of us would have been better. Mark had certainly a great college career, but I'm just wondering what if he would have been there. Yeah. He was really good in high school, really great in high school, and he was good in college. And of course, now he's a great coach.
Oh man, he's just doing a fantastic job in Nebraska. Year in year out, they're cranking out just great lineups.
And there is. I'm not surprised at all at how great of a coach Mark has developed into, because he has a enthusiasm for the sport. That's rare. He's almost a childlike enthusiasm for the sport of wrestling. He's also a student of the sport. He knows technique. He knows how to teach. And then he cares deeply about the kids, and he wants the kids to succeed, and he cares about the program. So you couldn't find, if I was, a parent that had a kid that was going into school, you couldn't find a better spot to place your kid than the University of Nebraska and Mark Manning.
No, absolutely. He's doing a fantastic job there. And I remember this was probably, I don't even know, it was maybe 5 years ago or something. This video went viral. Him in some football pads taking on some football player in like Oklahoma drill.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. He's still got that intensity, I guess.
Yeah, he has great intensity. I wouldn't encourage him to get on the football field though.
He probably doesn't need to do it anymore.
Not his skill set.
Yeah. That's hilarious. But so you were junior national champ back then too.
Yeah.
It
went with the South Dakota team to Iowa then, and it was always a great trip.
Yep.
And my junior year, I got second in Greco's, lost to a great wrestler in Greco by the name of Phil Lancetella. It was probably the first Greco tournament I ever competed in. So I didn't know what I was doing, but it was fun. And then my senior year, I won the freestyles and beat Dan Shade in the finals. So that was a key win back in the early days to beat somebody like Dan Shade.
Yeah, that's not a bad.
No, he was not happy.
That's not a bad win.
There might have been some tears after that loss, but I was happy. That's quite a win. I mean, I remember when the junior nationals used to be in Iowa. It was way before the Fargo. Oh yeah, it was great going to Iowa City. sort of the capital of wrestling. Going there and competing in the junior nationals. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, now was that probably what you would consider your biggest accomplishment in high school?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I said, especially beating Dan Shade in the finals. Like I said, he was pretty impressive.
He was good.
Good dude. So, why Nebraska? What'd you decide that for?
Well, there is a story behind that. When we were in high school, Dale Barr, the coach at Michigan, came to Mobridge a couple times and put clinics on there in the summer, and we desperately wanted to go to Michigan. We loved the school. We loved Coach Barr and what he had done by coming to Mobridge, and yet, because of the needs on their team, he didn't offer my brother Jim a scholarship. And we were like, well, we can't afford to go to school somewhere without a scholarship. And Nebraska offered both of us scholarships. And it's interesting, this goes back to the Lewis family as well. So a fellow by the name of Daryl Monosmith came to the State A championships our senior year. We were Class B, and there was a bigger class, State A, which Rapid City was in, where Randy Lewis grew up. And Daryl happened to stumble into Randy's dad, Larry Lewis, at the state finals. And Larry said, hey, you're looking here at the state A's, but you ought to look at the two Scherr boys from Mobridge who just won the Class B tournament. And the rest is history. Darryl went back and told Coach Fears to recruit us, and Fears came up and visited us, and we ended up going to Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. So now Nebraska at the time, it's kind of a struggling program at the time, wasn't it? When you guys first got there?
I think Bob Fears was in his second year as a head coach when he recruited us. Mm-hmm. And the program literally was, was on death's door in terms of, success level before Fears came in. And when Bob came in, he was a hustler. He was a great recruiter. He worked hard, and he brought a number of good kids into the program. Jim and I included, along with later than the next year, he brought in Gary Albright. And the program really took off from there.
Right.
We ended up fourth my senior year.
Oh, wow.
So we ended up getting a trophy as Jim and I won, and Gary Albright took second, and we got a trophy. And I think that's one of the first trophies that Nebraska had gotten at the NCAA tournament.
Wow. What did your lineup look like at that time, that fourth place year?
We had. Al Freeman had already graduated, and Billy and Johnny Selman had graduated. So we had a bunch of younger guys, and really the only points that were scored were myself, Jim, and Gary.
Wow!
So it wasn't a lineup that many people would remember,
right?
From those years.
Yeah, with the three, it scored it scored quite a bit of points.
Well, there was some interesting. We got in the press a couple of times. They called us the Murderers Row.
That's right.
I
just saw that.
Gary, yeah. And we wrestled numerous matches that year where the three of us ended with 3 pins in a row in the dual meets. And we were wrestling University of North Dakota at our place one year, that senior year, and we ended up going into Jim's match down by 17 points. And of course they were feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
And sure enough, Jim pinned his guy, I pinned my guy, and then Gary made short work of his guy and pinned him, and we ended up beating him by 1 point. So those were fun times.
I bet. That's because I just saw that posted on your Facebook. There, that you posted.
That was a fun. That was a fun thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, who back in college? Who was your college rival that you could remember back then?
Well, we really didn't, like Oklahoma State or Oklahoma or Iowa State. Those are the Big 8 teams were our rivals. Yeah. So, and strangely, University of Northern Iowa was a big rival.
Really?
We used to have some pretty vicious dual meets with
probably
UNI.
in the West Gym there. I bet that was wild. Huh?
So my freshman year, I didn't really understand how big Nebraska football was, but we ended up losing to Oklahoma that year. And I remember, on campus, girls were streaming out of their sorority houses, bawling and crying, and I was like, man, what the heck's going on here? Football, I didn't realize it was that important. But when we wrestled Oklahoma down at their place in the dual meet that year, and they came out and handed us oranges at the face-off, which we didn't appreciate that much. So I beat my guy that night. I can't remember who it was, but I ended up beating him. But we were not pleased with Oklahoma for handing us those oranges.
Yeah, I bet. Because Nebraska football I think is always going to be pretty big. But man, back in those heydays right there, because you were there when. They had. that was when they were.
Yeah, Tom Osborne was the coach, and we ended up losing to Miami in the national championship game. They didn't have a national title game, but was for all intents and purposes in the Orange Bowl against Miami, and we lost a close game. And that was a year we should have gone undefeated. We had a great team. Mm-hmm. Osborne was coach. We had Mike Rozier and Turner Gill and Irvin Fryer and all those guys. It was a great team.
Wow. Well, you're bringing back names. I
know. Blast from the past.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but that's been fun to have that heritage of Nebraska football. We got to get back to that, but we'll get there sooner or later.
Yeah. Well, it looks like with what Mark's doing at Nebraska, on the wrestling side. I was watching, I watched the Iowa match on, I can watch them all on TV now. Just the people that are turning out for wrestling matches now is pretty
I know,
impressive.
it's amazing. I was there, we had an alumni reunion match there, and crowd was fantastic. Sellout.
Yeah.
It's great to see.
Oh, man. It's great to see, how many different programs are doing that. Just, even like the big traditional programs like your Oklahoma States, your Iowas, they're even with the things they're doing with just the production on the production part. I was at the Iowa State UNI match when I interviewed Kevin Dresser and Nate Carr, and the crowd was fantastic. It's a great time for college wrestling right now.
Yeah, I think it's on the upswing. It's fantastic to see what's happening in the sport with these college rivalries, bringing out fans and crowds, and with social media adding to it. It's been nice to see it unfold.
Yeah. So speaking of, I guess, rivalries, individual rivalries in college, who would probably be your biggest individual rivalry?
Well, I didn't fare.
Did you wrestle Shade?
Yeah,
Shade again or no?
Not in college. My brother had wrestled him multiple times, but I never wrestled him after that. Really? At least that I can remember.
Yeah.
Pete Bush was a rival. So Pete beat me for the junior world team in that would have been in '81, I think. And I ended up going down a weight class, so I was on the team at 180 and got a silver medal. And I don't remember, Pete was on the team then at 198, and I'm sure he medaled. I don't remember, but he was a great guy, a great wrestler. But we wrestled in the Midlands my senior year, and I ended up taking him down right at the end of the match to win. And then in the NCAAs, we would have met either in the quarters or semis, and he ended up getting beat early by somebody, and then I ended up winning through and won. But he was tough.
Yeah.
But so I got a story.
Yeah.
I brought Gable in after I had finished wrestling to talk to my guys. I managed an investment business here in Chicago. I brought Dan in to talk to my salespeople to inspire them, and of course he did a great job. So he tells this story about how much dedication it takes and how he really cared about his athletes, and how he had one athlete who his senior year had a defeat his junior year, and he came back his senior year and really wanted to cap his career off with an NCAA title. And so he spent all this time coming in at 4, 5, 6 in the morning and working out with this guy before practice and working out with him after practice. And he really brought him along. And the guy ended up winning an NCAA title that year. And I'm like, well, yeah, you didn't tell these guys that was Ed Banach who beat me in the semifinals.
Was it
my junior year? And I'm like, Dan, kind of embarrassed me in front of my own guys, but that was the guy that he was talking about.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
But Eddie was great. I'm glad he retired, and I ended up. Eddie won the Olympics in '84, and then I won the World Championships in '85. So thanks, Ed, for retiring and giving me a shot.
Ed Banach. I mean, because now you're talking about the years that obviously I grew up in Cedar Rapids, just right down the street from Iowa City.
Yeah.
So Ed Banach, Pete Bush, like all those guys. Those are just
those are great. Great guys.
Iowa.
Great guys, great wrestlers.
Just exciting dual meets in the field house, and just the Banach brothers were monsterly popular back then. It just
I wish sometimes I wish that I had wrestled for Gable, but obviously Iowa had enough guys that they didn't need to recruit me and my brother. But he was a great influence on my career. We always looked up to him. So when we were kids, we went to Gable's camps in Mason City, Iowa. And of course, one of the reasons why we were inspired to compete and wrestle and get to the Olympics was watching the '72 Olympics on TV. We were 11 years old. We were just fascinated and excited by wrestling after watching Gable win in '72, and the Peterson brothers and Wayne Wells and all those guys. And then getting to go to his camps in Mason City Iowa was inspiring and educational as well. So I won the World Championships in '85, and I got one letter from somebody saying, congratulations, you've really done a great job. You built your career up. It's amazing to see what you did going from last year to this year, et cetera. Guess who that letter was from? Dan Gable.
Really?
Yeah, that's the kind of guy Dan is. He cares, and he took the time to write me that letter. That was very touching.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I spent 4.5, almost 5 years with him, in the Iowa room. So that doesn't surprise me at all. He's just, he's been a huge influence on my life. And have the podcast. I had a podcast with him. It was a lot of fun. He's still coaching me. He's still chewing my butt. Telling me, well, I don't like the fact that you embracing me and back up.
There's a good segue into that. I learned a lot from a lot of different coaches, and one of the things I learned from Dan was that you need to coach every individual in wrestling. You don't coach a team. Well, you do, but you have to coach the individual versus coaching the team. And he really focused on each individual athlete what they needed, both psychologically and physically, and mentally and technique-wise, as opposed to just saying, okay, we're going to put everybody through the same thing here on the team, and we're going to make everybody do the same thing. He was one of the guys that I recognized early on that said, hey, we're coaching 10 individuals, not a team.
Right. Yeah.
Necessarily.
Now, which team? Because he probably coached some of your teams.
Yeah, he coached multiple teams that I was
teams.
on, and he was the assistant coach on that Olympic team that I was on. He was coached a number of the World Cup and World Championship teams that I was on. It was always great because for whatever reason, he was one of the most inspirational coaches that I've ever been around. And it wasn't really as much what he said or what he did, but it was who he was. You knew that he was 100% committed to winning. He had paid the price himself, and you wanted to step up and give that level of commitment that he gave when he was coaching you.
Yeah. That's pretty much spot on right there. I mean, he's still. I mean, he's still plugging away to this day.
Oh yeah, I tell you what, he still knows, follows, loves, and is involved in wrestling. So. Yeah, it's an amazing guy.
Yep, he's got his grandkids a ton to take the time. Now they're into baseball, so he's getting into baseball now a little bit, but he's still doing the wrestling stuff.
Yeah, no, he's fantastic.
Yeah, but so you mentioned some other big coaching influences you had back in the day, and one of them recently deceased, Jay Robbs. Jason.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I learned so much from Jay Robinson. I was around him. He was coaching, the world team level when I was competing. And he was at the camps often, and so you learned a lot as a wrestler from him. But watching him coach was also amazing. And Jay was never one to be shy about sharing his opinions about coaching and about how to educate athletes and how to build a program, et cetera. So watching and learning from him was amazing. One of the first things that I picked up from him was this idea that you could be more than what you thought you were if you learned how to bring yourself along mentally. He encapsulated with this, if you can dream it and then you can believe it, you can achieve it, was sort of a mantra that he used to repeat. And he's one of the first guys that I ever saw talk about visualization, visualizing yourself becoming better and using visualization as a technique to improve. He was always thinking about ways outside the box to get better. And he really was a master at coaching. So I got a story. My year I won the World Championships in 1985. I'm coaching at J. Rob's intensive camp. And I'm there as a clinician. And, of course, I'm not doing what these kids are doing. Man, there's no way. There's no way.
He used to run them through.
And I'm watching all these practices. Well, he had this kid that had one leg in the camp. And I was amazed. The kid was doing everything. I mean, he didn't shy away from, running sprints to wrestling to whatever was required of him. So towards the end of the camp, they had a 10-mile run that all the kids had to do. And, he, of course, offered the clinicians an opportunity. You could come out to the 10-mile run if you want to. And I'm like, I'm staying home in bed, man. I'm not running 10 miles. So I'm laying in my bed, and I got a ground floor room in one of the dorms. And I hear these kids running by, and I look out my window, and I see this kid with one leg running past me in that 10-mile run. And I said, there's no way I can stay in bed.
Yeah.
I got up, and I ran the 10-mile run, and I said to you just think, man, some people overcome a lot more than you've had to overcome, do more, and you can do more as an athlete than you've been doing. And it was an inspirational moment that I took to heart and ended up going on and winning the 85 World Championships. So
wow.
It was amazing. I would have been maybe a little more comfortable in bed, but I decided to get up and run the 10 miles, and I didn't regret it.
I tell you what it's interesting. You work those camps, and there is some legendary stories just come out of those camps as far as some of the things. I mean, just the workload he would put on those kids.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as a coach, I think about some of the things we made our kids do back when I was coaching, and I'm like, man, we'd be in jail now. Those were a different day and age and time, and you could do more. But the other thing I think that Jay really pioneered maybe in the sport of wrestling, which ended up being such an influential thing for Iowa and Minnesota and other programs, was this idea that you should train to get tired, not to avoid getting tired. So when I was working early in my wrestling career, et cetera, you try to train hard enough so that you don't get tired when you go out on the mat. And it's a mindset that I think most athletes have. Hey, I'm going to condition myself so well that when I step out on the mat, I don't get tired. Well, Jay had a completely opposite view. His view was, look, you train to get tired, and then when you go out and compete, you should get yourself tired. Fatigue is your friend. And if you can learn to function in practice when you're tired, so train to get tired, train to get fatigued, and then learn to function when you're fatigued. If you get in a match, you can drag your opponent into the deep end of the water where you're comfortable because you've been tired and fatigued before. You push yourself hard enough to get there, and he's obviously going to get there as well because he has to keep up with you, and he's not comfortable at that level of fatigue, and you are. And Jay, had that mantra that, fatigue is your friend. And I think it was really, really brilliant way to think about the sport and think about conditioning.
Now, do you remember certain times in which maybe you instituted that into your wrestling? Because I think you were wrestling internationally at that time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I knew that I was better conditioned than my opponents, and I wanted to get them tired. When I went up to 220, I was trying to survive the first 1, 2, 3 minutes of the match. Yeah. I mean, the most I ever weighed was 205, maybe. And these guys are coming down from 230, 240. And when you had a Russian who knew what he was doing and his technique was good and he was that strong, I was trying to dodge him. And my way that I would compete and could beat some of them was to get them tired. And I knew if I pushed myself hard enough to get them tired, a la Jay Robinson, that I could still function and they couldn't. And I won a lot of matches against Russians towards the end of the matches where I could end up getting them tired and getting them fatigued. And that was my really only chance against these big guys at 220.
Yeah. I mean, I've met Jay a handful of times. I mean, he's always been great. The conversation's always been fantastic. It's just, I mean, he's had such a amazing wrestling mind, and he was just ways ahead of people. Yeah,
it was really interesting to sit and listen to him talk. He had an incredible mind, and he was always thinking about how to do better, build a program, how you could do things differently or better than had been done before him. And it was very interesting to listen to him talk about wrestling. It's a shame, he's gone too soon, but he left his mark.
Yeah, you betcha. What's a very vivid Jay Robinson maybe workout story from back in the day that maybe he put you through? Because I heard I've heard legendary ones.
Yeah. Well, Jay was never really the head coach when I was competing, so I didn't really get any Jay Robinson workout stories. But I'll tell you, we adopted this thing that he was doing at Iowa and then later at Minnesota called Red Flag Day.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I don't know if you remember the old Red Flag Days.
Hold on. Let me shake that out of my head. Yeah, I do.
Right, yeah. If you put the red flag out in the wrestling room and the guys walked in, so when I was coaching in Indiana, we would do Red Flag Day. And the guys would walk in and see those red flags and just dread would, fill their bodies because they knew they were in for it. And so what Red Flag Day meant was you pushed as hard as you could. And it was a day there was no slacking off, and you worked as hard as you could, and then you worked yourself and got out of the room. So when we would do this at Indiana, if we did it in a morning workout, we would go until somebody threw up.
Oh, geez.
And of course, I often wondered if the guys didn't figure out how to throw up earlier than they needed to. But that was always a way to challenge the guys. But it was it was an effective way that you could get the guys to understand they could push themselves harder than they really knew they could.
Yeah. I remember because we had those. Coach Gable had those as well, and I remember it even stuck with me through my coaching career when I took over at Durant. I had this specific red flag made with our little school logo on it, so I come in there waving it when their kids are like, "No."
We had those flags made too.
I definitely remember those, and like I said, Coach Gable, he always had. I mean, he always had some. I mean, do you remember any type of specific workouts from him that
from Gable?
Maybe he put you through
I know
back
your
in the
other
day.
guys have talked about this too, but I went there and worked out a few times, and the thing that was always infuriating was one more minute.
Yeah.
And then, you'd say, okay, I'm going to bust bust hard for this next minute.
Yeah.
And then you'd be like, all right, just another minute or two. And then you'd go that other 2 minutes. All right, okay, now we're done.
Yeah.
Okay, well, get someone new, and we're going 3 more minutes. And this would go on for another 45 minutes or an hour or whatever. Until everybody from Iowa, of course, I wouldn't do this because I didn't know Dan well enough, but these guys would be swearing at him. So that's my memory of the Gable workouts.
Yeah, that was very common. But yeah, like I said, it's good memories though. At the time, it's not.
You're frustrated at the time.
At the time.
But again, it shows you that you're mentally you want to push hard to do that last minute, and then you're like, well, now I got to go another 2 minutes. But you can do it, right? You can push yourself harder than you believed you could. And that was a nice technique.
Yeah. For sure. Well, I mean, like I said, you did. You were there in Nebraska in the early '80s, and in '81, this was a really interesting story that I found out about you just yesterday. So in '81, that was the last year of the AAU control. So I mean, you guys had 2 nationals in freestyle Greco.
Yeah.
Explain
So the national governing body is sanctioned by the international governing body. So in this case, FILA was sanctioning the AAU in the United States. Well, the AAU was losing control of wrestling in the United States, and FILA was going to be sanctioning USA Wrestling, or the U.S. Wrestling Federation, USWF, the next year. And so USWF, in preparation for that, held nationals in freestyle and Greco for the senior level, even though they weren't the national governing body yet, but they were doing it in preparation for the next year when they would take over. So I wrestled in the AAU freestyle and Greco-Roman nationals, and then the USWF freestyle and Greco-Roman nationals. And I think they were done in like 4 or 5, 6 weeks at the most. So you're wrestling in a national tournament back to back to back. Yeah. So I won the AAU freestyles, and I got second in the AAU Greco-Romans to Steve Frazier.
Yeah.
That guy killed me in Greco.
Well, he was kind of good. Yeah, he was kind of good. He wasn't bad.
And then
Olympic gold medalist for those guys. And
then I got second in the USWF freestyles. But Frazier had gotten beaten in the USWF Grecos in the semis, and then I won against the guy that beat him in the finals.
No kidding.
So I was in the finals and won 2 of the 4 nationals in freestyle Greco-Roman when I was a sophomore in college.
Wow.
So that was a good year.
In 4 finals in like 5 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's impressive. Well, that kind of took you into your. I mean, obviously you had a great international success back in basically the late '80s.
Yeah, well, we were set up for that by a guy named Stan Desick, who was coaching at. He was the AAU national team coach.
Oh.
And he was their resident program was in Lincoln, Nebraska. So he lived in Lincoln, and he would come in and coach, help us at our practices. And Stan was a master at defensive wrestling technique, stance, positioning, and then leg defense once somebody got in on the legs, and also match strategy. So we learned all of that from Stan Desick our first few years in Lincoln, and we really knew how to wrestle freestyle. And then there were some Romanian national team coaches that were stationed there in Lincoln with the AAU as well. And so we learned how to wrestle Greco-Roman from those guys. So we were really well versed in both Greco-Roman and freestyle technique from that coaching experience we received at the University of Nebraska.
Wow. I mean because you mentioned the World Championships already at 198 pounds in 1985, but then you also made you won the nationals in Greco as well.
Yep.
U.S. nationals in Greco. I mean,
I did.
I can only think of me personally. I mean, of course, I'm not consider myself a great historian, but I know, like Sam Hayes-Winkle comes to mind. I mean, I think he made an Olympic team, made a Greco World team. Other than you two, I really can't think anybody else that done it.
I really liked Greco, and I was really good at it, with the exception of Steve Frazier.
Yeah.
Steve was strong, he was tenacious, and he was shorter than me, and I could not get him into a lock position, and I could not get underneath him. He was just too tough for me. Mm-hmm. So I really couldn't beat Steve, and I didn't see trying to beat my head against the wall in Greco and competing against Steve, so I focused on freestyle.
Oh, so Greco was your first.
Hats off to Steve Frazier for pushing me out of Greco.
Yeah.
But I did wrestle. Mike Hauck was the first Greco-Roman U.S. world champion ever. So I wrestled Mike.
He won the Worlds in...
He won there, I think, 85.
85, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I wrestled Mike twice in Greco when we were both coming up, and I think I wrestled him in that 82, 83 era, and I beat Mike twice.
Wow. So Greco was almost like your first. No, you're number one.
Yeah, Greco. I got second in the junior nationals at Greco, and then I hurt myself for the junior nationals Greco my senior year and couldn't compete in it. Mm-hmm. And then I was a senior national Greco champ, so I like Greco, but yeah, I couldn't beat Steve Frazier. But he wasn't a bad guy to say you couldn't beat.
Yeah, I know.
He was pretty good.
He was really good. He was really good. So you said, okay, well, I'll just wrestle freestyle then.
Yeah, I like freestyle equally as well. And I could have seen myself competing in Greco for sure.
Wow. What was what was when you were kind of, I guess, going back and forth from the two styles? What was the hardest part about that transition? I mean, obviously, you can't grab legs and so forth, and Greco,
I didn't really see it that hard because I was always an upper body wrestler.
Oh, okay. Even in freestyle?
College style, I was always wrestling. Most of my techniques were upper body, and so it wasn't really that difficult of a transition for me because I was very comfortable wrestling upper body technique.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then we had really good mat technique from working with Standezic and working with the Romanian national coaches. Mm-hmm. So we were comfortable everywhere on the mat.
Yeah,
I think it was harder for me. College wrestling, folk style was much harder for me than freestyle. If the colleges were wrestling freestyle back at that time, my record would have been much better because I was a much better freestyle wrestler than I was a college wrestler.
Yeah, you must have had a good gut wrench.
I had a great gut wrench.
I was like, you must have had a good gut wrench. Yeah, because our gut wrench is a gut wrench in freestyle and Greco. It is
same
what it is.
thing.
Yeah. It's funny because I just interviewed Dennis Hall.
Great guy, great wrestler.
Yeah, I love Dennis. Yeah, he's the man. But I was telling him, back when he was training with Terry Brands, back in 95, 96-ish. And Terry had specifically said, listen, anybody wants to learn a gut wrench, you go to the Greco guys.
Yeah,
that was.
Yeah, we learned our gut wrench from those Romanian national coaches, and they were really good at it. Yep.
Yeah, I mean it's because it made a lot of sense. I mean, as far as that's going to be your good to go to right there. Who is the who do you remember being your toughest Greco opponent, foreign or domestic?
Well, I didn't wrestle that much.
Other than Frazier, obviously.
I didn't wrestle that many guys internationally. I only wrestled, I think, in one international Greco tournament. Mm-hmm. But Steve Frazier, and then Mike Hauck. We had a couple of really good matches. Mm-hmm. I wrestled. I got third, I think, in the Concord International Greco tournament when I was in college, and the Hungarians were. I don't remember the guy's name, but the Hungarians were amazing Greco wrestlers.
Oh, yeah.
Just really strong and great technique and really, really good. And that's the thing, there's so many good Greco athletes out there. And Greco has such a great tradition in various parts of Europe that it is a tremendously difficult sport to compete in. And of course, our style here doesn't lend itself as well to Greco as it does to freestyle. So we struggle still, I think, to compete effectively and consistently in Greco.
Yeah, I agree with that. What would you think? I mean, and now we're going to spin off on a whole different because I'm our state chair. I'm a state chairman in Tennessee.
Oh yeah,
I've been our state chairman for about 15 years, and so I'm a big USA wrestling guy, obviously. And I want to see all styles flourish, and it's really, really tough. It's just really tough in the way our culture works as far as with folk style, just folk style specifically, because we are so folk style driven in this country. What do you think would really help our Greco program out as far as kind of getting maybe our better athletes or just making us more competitive on the world stage in that style?
Well, I think identifying at an early age athletes who have an aptitude for Greco and an interest in it and building them into great Greco competitors. Mm-hmm. If you don't have the base of a program, for instance, let's say there's the same exact thing if you're running a small college program or a college program that doesn't have a lot of NIL money. Mm-hmm. What you would want to do is identify a core group of guys, 3, 4, 5 guys. In this case with Greco, you'd have to find 7, 10, and bring them along together and focus all your resources on those guys and get them coached up to where they can succeed. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to build a broad-based program today. Now you can start that for 10, 20, 30 years down the road, where you started at a grassroots level and you build and promote Greco, and you work on getting those techniques out into the community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can do that for a long period of time. But if you wanted to build a program quickly, you identify a small number of athletes and you pour everything into those guys, and you get them to compete and succeed at a higher level.
Yeah, because it is such a, it's just a whole different sport, as compared to what kids are used to.
We just don't wrestle that way in the United States. And I've even seen it more so now than during my era. So, during my era, there were a lot of guys that wrestled upper body. Tie-ups, changing tie-ups, locking up, throwing was really a big part of the sport. I don't see that as much anymore. And I think we've just gone away from that more in favor of the rolling around. Even the heavyweight guys are rolling around on the ground and giving up a leg and then rolling underneath and then ending up in scramble positions, which is great wrestling. It's fun to watch, and the techniques are great. But that's not going to help you as much in freestyle, and it certainly isn't going to help you at all in Greco-Roman. Yeah. So I think we've even gone farther away from Greco than we used to be.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah, it's just, because again, I want to see all the different styles survive, and,
it'd be great.
And it's just, I've just been racking my brain on how we're gonna help that specific stylist of our sport, flourish and continue to move along and to make us relevant. And it's difficult though, and especially now. I think this would be my opinion on it, especially now with the amount of NIL money that guys can make grabbing legs now.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody a lot less apt to just going upper body if it's not going to be something they're going to be able to put in their college. Repertoire.
It's a business now.
Yeah.
And the kids need to think like businessmen, and the coaches do. And whether you like it or not, it's the reality of college wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, hopefully we can figure something out, because like I said, I like to see all the different styles.
Yeah. It would be great.
Yeah. How about freestyler? Like, who's the best freestyler you ever put your hands on internationally?
Kadartsev from Soviet Union. Yeah. That guy was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it about the Soviets back in the day that was just? You hear it all. But you actually have. That's the thing that's so interesting about you and where this conversation is going to go, is you have so many different ties into all this internationally with all the stuff that you did with the Olympic stuff and everything. So
well, I'll tell you, the Russians were first and foremost strong. They were. Kadartsev and some of the other guys that I wrestled were just incredibly physically strong. And it was almost mind-blowing when you would go out and they would, grab a wrist or grab a 2-on-1, and you just literally couldn't get free from it, no matter, it wasn't a matter of technique, it wasn't a matter of positioning, it was just, they were just that strong. So whatever they were doing over there to get that strong, they were doing it well.
We don't have to get it there, but I heard.
They were strong. And then second, if you looked at their technical systems, they had a blend of two different things. They had a national training system with national coaches, and coaches at a young age that were taught, who were teaching wrestlers at a young age to do all the same techniques that the senior level athletes were doing, and doing them just as well with just the same amount of technique and form. So this, whatever national coaching system they had, or program they had, training system for coaches they had, really worked. Because when we go over there and watch their youth wrestlers training, their technique was just unbelievable. Wow. And it was all correct. Then the second thing is they had these national styles from, Georgia, which is upper body wrestling, where they were doing whizzers and throws and all this stuff. And other parts of, that were over towards Asia, where they were doing this lower leg wrestling, more like the Iranians were doing, et cetera. There were different cultural styles that were appropriated.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they had a lot of the different cultural styles that were successful. So you blend, both a tradition and history of wrestling and cultural wrestling, which was very prominent and made these guys really avid wrestlers and great technicians at their styles, as well as the national coaching that came down from the top. In my era, they were just really well coached with great technique.
Wow.
And then they were physically, they were coached to peak at the right times. They were well coached, and they did a great job of scouting U.S. wrestlers. If you beat one of them, they would then come back and work on how to beat you, et cetera, et cetera. They were just really well coached, well-trained, great technical wrestlers, were incredibly strong. Put all that together, it was just really, they were really difficult to compete against. If you look at our era, they had just this unbelievable team from the Beloglossovs at the lightweights to Fadzayev, in the middleweights, to the Kadartsevs in the upper weights, to the Gobetashvilis and other guys at heavyweight, et cetera. I mean, it was just literally an all-star lineup up and down, the weight classes.
And they were so deep too. I mean, the weight classes were so deep. I mean, you mentioned just some absolute legends right there, but even behind them, I mean.
Oh yeah, they were 3, 4, 5 deep.
Wow.
At all their weight classes. I mean, a friend of mine that would go to he was from a European country that would get invited to go to the Soviet training camps. Said they would literally have 50 mats laid out on a huge grid, and they would have 2 or 3 coaches standing over every Russian athlete, and then he would go and be competing against one of the Russian guys, and if he would execute a move on the Russian, the coaches would stop. It would make him do the same thing 3, 4 times until the guy could figure out how to counter it, and then they would work on it, et cetera, et cetera. And so, they were just really well coached, and they were deep, but they were great athletes and with great technique and well coached.
Yeah. Now, who else at the time? Like say when you wrestled and you won your worlds in '85, who else was the pretty really strong countries at the time?
Well, in those days, all the Eastern European countries were really good. So in the '85 World Championships, when I won, I beat a Bulgarian, I beat an East German, and I beat a Russian, and then I beat an Iranian in the finals.
Wow.
So you had a very deep roster of Eastern European countries that were really, really good. So if you think about the pecking order at that time, Russia was the best. And then you had East Germany, which was pretty good, Bulgaria, which was pretty good, Turkey, which was pretty good, Iran, which was really good as well. And then, West Germany had some decent guys. And then sprinkle around other countries, France, Cuba was obviously very good. So you had a pretty deep set of countries that were pretty tough.
Right. The Iranian fans, they still pretty wild back then too.
Oh yeah, yeah. They would bring their little horns and you'd get the Iran cheer.
Yeah.
They followed wrestling well. There's a story in '85. It's particularly maybe pertinent or relative to today. I wrestled an Iranian in the finals in '85, and of course. 1979, they had a regime change there. And I think 85 was the first major international tournament that they participated in after the regime changed in 79.
Really?
Yeah, they just didn't they didn't want to travel outside the country and compete at that time. But this was in Hungary, which was part of the Soviet Bloc at that time. So I think they felt like they could compete. And when I beat the Iranian, between the match and the award ceremony, there was some Iranian officials came over and said, "Hey, we're just letting you know he's going to walk off the stand during the USA national anthem. He doesn't mean you any disrespect, but if he doesn't do this, if he goes back to Iran, he'll be killed when he comes back into the country." So sure enough, when the U.S. national anthem played, he walked off the stand. And sadly, he had to forfeit his medal because he walked off the stand during our anthem.
Really?
But, saved his life. So there's an interesting, so that regime was obviously not friendly back then,
right.
So obviously a terrible, terrible situation which the Iranians have to live under. There's a story there, though, when I was working in Chicago, years later, I get into a cab. The cab driver is Iranian. He turns around and looks at me and says, "Hey, you're Scherr. You wrestled Mohabi in the finals of the World Championships." And he said that he and I are from the same village. So you've got to come to my house and meet my family. So we detour on this cab ride. He takes me to his house, meet his wife and his family, and they literally feed me for 3 or 4 hours. Like I was so stuffed when I walked out of there. I ate every dish that they had in the house. We had a great conversation, and so the Iranian people are obviously very warm people.
Yes.
They love wrestling; it's their national sport. That and soccer, etc. But what an interesting experience, right?
Wow! Just out of a random cab here in Chicago.
Just out of a random cab drive here in Chicago.
That is crazy, and that's the bizarre part is that like mean, first of all, people understand that how fortunate we have it here. I mean, the United States.
Right.
I mean, because that's pretty scary.
Yeah, you travel. If you travel around the world, you realize very quickly we are very fortunate to live in the United States.
No, absolutely. But then the passion that the Iranian people have, like just for wrestling alone,
it's amazing.
They are. I mean, U.S. wrestlers are rock stars. I've heard this from multiple friends of mine that have went there and competed, and it's just a crazy feel.
Same thing. It used to be the same thing in Russia. I don't think it is the same now. But you could get in a cab in Moscow, and the cab driver would turn around and say, "Hey, Scherr, you wrestled, yada yada yada." They know the sport and they love the sport. That used to be the case. Now I don't think it's as popular as it used to be.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize it was like that back in Russia too.
Yeah, it was.
No kidding. Wow. I knew Iran. I mean, that's, and I remember my first time ever witnessing the Iranian fans. it was in, was it 95? Yeah, 95. And the World's in Atlanta. I went down and watched commentary, and it was wild.
Yeah,
I was like, what in the world?
They love the sport.
It's crazy.
They're enthusiastic. Yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing in '96 in Atlanta. They were going wild. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. So, but you went back in another Olympic run in '88 in Seoul.
Yep.
And decided to move up.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There's an interesting story behind that. In '85, I won the World Championships. My brother Jim had lost a close match with Mark in the World Team Trials, and Mark won the World Championships that summer as well. So Mark and I were back-to-back world champions at 80 and 198. Then in '86, Jim had beaten Medalist, the Russian, in the World Cup. I had lost to Kadartsev, but I beat Kadartsev in the dual meet at Northwestern right after the World Cup. And I felt at that time, and I lost a close match with him in the World Cup, and then I beat him, and that's the last time I ever wrestled him. But I thought I thought I had figured out, how to wrestle this guy and was going to have a good chance in the future. Dave Schultz came to me shortly after that and said, "Hey, look, why should the four of us, have to compete against one another? Mark and Jim are competing against one another now. He said, I might want to go up to 180 at some point, but he said, I'll tell you what, if you go up to 220 and then Jim can go up to 198, you two guys can have those spots on the team. And then Mark will stay at 180 and I'll stay at 163, and the four of us will be on the team together at the same time. I think that's a better plan," which sounded good to me. I wanted to make sure my brother was on the teams as well.
Right.
And that, Jim and Mark really wouldn't have to butt heads all the time.
Right.
And I thought it was better for the USA team as well. So I went up to 220. Now, I was the one that had to sacrifice there by going up and wrestling these big monsters at 220. But at the same time, it worked. I won 4 consecutive world and Olympic medals at 220 after that, after the World Championships at 85. My brother won 3 medals. Mark won a couple more after that, and Dave, obviously won a couple more after that. So, we all were successful.
That's a pretty selfless decision to move up. I'm going to tell you that right now, Bill. I've been around wrestling for good long. I mean, I'm 53 now, so I've been started about 40 plus years. There ain't a whole lot of people that that's a pretty selfless act.
Well, I lifted weights really hard the first year and gained some weight, but then when I hit these 2-a-day training camps, it would just come right back off.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, when I never cut weight in my wrestling.
Because we're not talking just like, oh, I'm going to move up from a high school team, because to make our lineup talk. We're talking about the Olympic team, Olympic and world teams here.
I never cut weight in wrestling except my freshman year in high school. After that, I said, there's no more cutting weight. So I wrestled 190 at Nebraska, and I literally weighed 190. I would literally show up to weigh-ins with a Snickers bar and a Coke, and I would just torment the lightweight guys. I'd be standing behind the scale with my Snickers bar and my Coke, and they hated me. They hated me for it. But I weighed 190, and I wrestled 190, and then when I started wrestling freestyle, my weight crept up. I remember winning the World Championships in '85, and I weighed 198 at day 2, 3 week after I weighed 198 on the button and never cut weight.
Wow.
And then, of course, when I went to 220, I never cut it there either. So I would tell parents that if you want your kids to enjoy the sport and to learn more in the sport, don't have them cut weight. They can succeed at whatever weight they're going. Just have them enjoy the sport and, stay fat and happy.
Yeah, no, it takes a whole lot of painful element out of it. The whole thing, you can concentrate on just getting better at wrestling.
Right.
It's just the weight cutting is just, it's just but you keep giving a gold medal out and kids are going to want to do it. It's just the way it works, I guess.
Yeah, I like the idea of the way they do weigh-ins where the weigh-ins are close enough to the matches where you can't cut so much weight.
It was because it was rough back in the day.
It
was some big weight cuts.
Oh yeah, you had a day before you were just cutting weight like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I tell these kids now like how much time we had before, like even high school. High school, we'd weigh in the morning, we wouldn't wrestle until the evening, and then we're like in college, we'd have 5 and 7 hour weigh-ins. They're like, what? It's forever.
I know, right? Yeah, I like the way it is now. I don't think weight cutting should be a big part of the sport.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that I like where it's at right now. I think we're in a good spot with it right now.
Me too.
I mean, until they go to like a mat side weigh-in of some sort. I think right now it's pretty good. But you mentioned the Schultz brothers. You guys had a pretty special relationship with them, I'm assuming. Yeah,
I mean, we really respected Mark and Dave. They were on the national scene a bit before we were, and maybe more successful early on. So we really looked up to Dave and Mark, and I ended up developing a great relationship with both of them, but I learned a lot from Dave. And Dave was one of these guys, and this is something I think people can really learn from. Dave believed he had something to learn from anybody. So you would see Dave see some junior high kid or high school kid or non-successful college guy do something. Dave would walk over and say, "What did you just do there? Let me see that again." Yeah, he had this strong intellectual curiosity about the sport, about technique. He wanted to learn as much as he could, and he believed he could learn from anybody. So he would go to Russia, and he would grab these guys and pick their brains. He would go wherever he would go. He was asking people, "Show me what you do. Show me what you did here." And then he would work on it, learn it, watch it. Or if he would see somebody, he would get the tapes, and he's like, "Look, I saw this guy wrestling, I want to watch what this guy did. Then I'm going to try to pick it apart, dissect it, and learn from it." And I was fortunate enough to be able to learn from Dave of a variety of different techniques, and it was just amazing. Yeah, amazing stuff. But that special curiosity he had about the sport and thirst for knowledge and desire to learn technique and more of it all the time. See, a lot of guys get their technique set and they think, okay, I can be successful with this, and then they try to hone those techniques and move forward.
Right.
Yeah, that's one way to do it, but I think a better way might be to broaden your techniques and continue to keep trying to learn, as Dave did.
Yeah, and that's interesting to say that, because I remember just when he was, it would be the Olympic Training Center. We had the Olympic training camps at the time, and I remember Tom and Terry and the Steiners and everybody, they would all their schedule would be around when Schultz was going to be there. And because everybody wanted to learn from him, so it's interesting how he was always wanting to learn from everybody else, and got to just transfer that on down. Yeah,
he was very generous with his time and his teaching. A lot of guys aren't like that, but Dave was. And another quality that Dave had that was particularly impressive was he made you feel like you were his best friend. And Dave Schultz, I'm sure a lot of people felt like they were Dave Schultz's best friends because he made you feel like that. He was warm, open, engaging, and you really felt like, hey, this guy really likes me. I'm one of Dave's really good friends. And then you look back, you're like, wow, Dave had a ton of really good friends. Right. But I was fortunate enough to be one of those people, and I learned a tremendous amount from Dave.
Yeah, I mean, but he must have had a switch to flip that he flipped, because I've heard he was
one of the things you didn't want to get on the wrong side of Dave in practice. I got too big for him to practice, so he didn't want to practice with me. But early on, Dave was a cutthroat competitor, so that switch did flip. Yeah. He did walk out there under that, and it was no holds barred at that time. He was also very strategic about how he wanted to position himself and create this air of dominance or invincibility or et cetera. He was a study of this guy, this book called The Book of Five Rings. Oh. Musashi was the author of that book. This was a samurai from the 16th century who was undefeated in 60 or 70 sword fights to the death. and he wrote a book about his strategies and techniques. And Dave read that book and studied that book and learned about how to both physically but also psychologically position yourself relative to your opponents. And he was good at it. So, he was very crafty with, for instance,
I've always heard that word about him. Crafty.
Yeah. So here's a story. He would tell guys, okay, look, I'm going to work out with you tomorrow. And this was a guy that Dave wanted to show, hey, look, maybe an up and coming 63 pounder, 80 pounder. And Dave wanted to say, hey, I'm better. I'm going to show this guy where he's at. So he'd say, okay, you show up at 5 p.m. tomorrow. We're going to work out. So the guy would be there, and they would either show up 30 or 40 minutes late, or show up on time, or whatever he felt was to his advantage. And then he would walk in, he would put his shoes on, and he would pound the guy for 10 or 15 minutes, and then walk out of the room.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, he was trying to establish an edge in a variety of different ways, and he was really, really good and clever at how he did these things. But I think he got a lot of that stuff out of the Book of Five Rings by Musashi.
Wow. I mean, it's
my theory anyway.
Yeah, I always love hearing Dave Schultz stories, just because, I mean, I think I might have met him one time. We were down in like 95 Worlds or something. I was down there with the Iowa guys and stuff. But I've just always heard just amazing stories about him. So I'm always just curious about what he was like.
Yeah.
What was it like the first time you put your hands like when you guys worked out?
He was extremely strong relative to what he looked like. It was like, where in the heck did this guy get this strength? I mean, he was really, really strong.
Yeah.
But he didn't look strong. And so that was the first thing that really surprised you. The second was when he would throw you on your head and be like, man, Dave, are you trying to hurt me? What's going on?
But he like spoke like he speak like 5 different languages like that. He said like just chop it up with all the different whatever fans and people from different countries.
He spent a lot of time trying to learn how to communicate, especially with the Russians, and it was it's admirable that he would take time to figure those languages out. I understand he had he would take these language books and put them in his bathroom and read when he was on the toilet because he was that dedicated to picking up these various languages.
Wow, that's something. Well, you transitioned after your wrestling career, basically into the corporate world.
Yeah, I ended up being fortunate enough to get a job with Goldman Sachs out of graduate school. So when I was wrestling, I was going to grad school. I finished the Indiana Kelley Graduate School of Business. So I wrestled in the Goodwill Games. Yeah. And then 3 days later,
let's get into that real quick. 'Cause you had a huge buzzer beater last second throw.
There's a funny story there. I wasn't really training that hard.
Yeah, wait, the corporate stuff. Wait, let's get back.
So this was 1990 Goodwill Games. It's going to be my last competition. So I'm wrestling with Jim maybe a week before the Goodwill Games, and he hits this arm throw on me, and I step around and block it, but the mat is wet, so my foot slides out, and I literally tear the groin muscle off the bone.
Oh, no.
I mean, it was devastating. So I couldn't do anything in practice. I mean, I literally couldn't wrestle. So they had me wrestle a practice match a couple of days before the tournament with Kirk Trost. And he pounded me. I couldn't even compete against him. So Leroy Smith was the head coach at the time, and he decides to bring me and have me compete. Although I think there were 4 or 5 matches. I wrestled in one warm-up match. I beat, I think, a Japanese guy or somebody that wasn't very good. And he had Kirk Trost wrestle the other matches. So for whatever reason, he throws me out in the finals against a guy named Golovko from Russia, who's not a tremendous athlete, but he was a good, good. The Russians, they're all good. They're all good. So, and I'm like, Leroy, what are you doing? He's like, I just got a feeling, here. So I go out and wrestle, and I can't do anything. I mean, I can't shoot. I tried to shoot one time, and he went around behind me. And I'm behind 1-0, and I'm like, man, I can't do anything. I can't shoot. I'm going to lose to this guy, and it's going to be terrible, whatever. Yeah. So I had been screwing around in practice before that with Jimmy Zaleski. And Jimmy shows me this garbage counter to a high crotch, where you reach back, you grab the guy's ankle, you pull it up to his butt, you grab his hip, and you roll over. And I'm like, I'll never do that. So I never practiced that move. I don't, whatever. So I get in a flurry. I force this guy into a flurry at the end of the match. And he shoots on he gets underneath me and goes and gets into the high crouch position. And I'm like, thank you, God. Because if he would have just stalled on his feet, I never could have shot on him because my leg was not in shape. So, and he's in there, and I'm like, Jimmy Zaleski's move. And I don't know where that came from because I never practiced. So I hit this thing and got 2 points as time expired. And I'm like, oh my, that was like manna from heaven. I didn't know where that wind came from. Man. And what a gift. But thank you, Jimmy Zaleski, and thank you, Golovko, for shooting. And thank you for Leroy Smith for putting me out there on the mat. But the sports writers voted for the best moment of the Goodwill Games, or the most exciting moment of the Goodwill Games after that. And that match, that win was voted the best moment of the Goodwill Games by the sports writers. Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
Well, there you go, Jimmy Zaleski.
Yeah, thanks. So that was my last match that I wrestled there.
So Jimmy, a quick plug in for Jimmy, because I love Jimmy. He's him and Barry Davis and Lenny, like they're huge influences on me and my brother's lives.
Yeah, great guys.
Because we went to the same high school. And so my brother and I we started wrestling because of this.
Jimmy and Barry and I were on the world team, the junior world team together.
They're the best.
Yeah, great guys.
We grew up in Ely. They were in Shueyville. My dad used to drive all the wrestling buses.
Oh yeah, wow.
And so Jimmy and Lenny and Barry, and then their brother Larry used to grab us when we were little and roll around with us.
Yeah.
And then fast forward, Barry and Jimmy were two of my coaches at Iowa when I was there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, they're just those guys are the best. They're awesome.
Great guys. Yeah. So, at any rate, that was fun. So, but that night, that match sealed the win over the Russians.
Wow.
Which was a good thing because Bruce ended up losing, I think it was to Gobetashvili in the next match.
Wow.
So, but that was one of the first like major international competitions we had beaten the Russians at. Yeah. So, Ted Turner's creation, the Goodwill Games, was a lot of fun. But I finished that, flew back to Indiana, got my family, drove from Indiana to New York, and started work that next Monday.
Wow.
At Goldman Sachs, yeah.
Really? Just got done wrestling Goodwill Games and then started Goldman Sachs.
Started work. And that was a whole different world. And you got to learn to, there you're working for 14, 15 hours a day, starting early, and, just wearing a suit and wearing a pair of dress shoes for 15 hours a day was drudgery to me at that time. But you make the adjustment and you move forward with life.
Yeah, well, you probably took I'm sure you took a lot of the lessons on the mat, put them towards that.
Yeah. There is tremendous amount you can learn from sports that you can apply to a business career for sure.
Because the intensity gets pretty high in that.
It's an entrepreneurial business, and you learn to be a self-starter, and you learn to manage your own career as a wrestler, and so it was natural to go into business.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, obviously, like I said, we're sitting here in your office, and you've obviously done well for yourself. So congrats. Yeah. So it's awesome to see that.
Thank you.
It's really cool just to see wrestlers transition from because you can't wrestle forever. You just can't. And it's just the way it is. And seeing them transition into other walks of life and be not only successful in wrestling, but then taking those things that they've learned from wrestling and just being successful in other parts.
I coached for 5 years at Indiana University and then for 5 more later at Northwestern. And some of my athletes have both succeeded on the mat, done very, very well. We had Brian Dolph was a national champ for us at Indiana. And then at Northwestern, when I was coaching, we had, Jake Herbert and Dustin Fox were NCAA champs for me there. And it was just really rewarding to work with them. And then to see them go on and have careers and be successful, both professionally, but as successful as people is really rewarding. Coaching's a really, really good profession from that perspective.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I was telling Coach Gable, I don't even know if Coach Gable knew I was doing it. He knew, like I told him one time in college that I started to coach a kids club after practice. This was back in '95. So I've been coaching since '95, and I wouldn't do anything else. I love impacting the world and just
fantastic.
Leading kids in the right direction through wrestling. It's awesome.
Yeah. So when I was once I established my career at Goldman, I started volunteer coaching. And one of the first things I did was volunteer coach for the women's national team.
I was just about to ask you.
Yeah. So I coached in 2005, 2006, and 2007, helping Terry Steiner, who was the national team coach, and I was a volunteer coach at those World Championships, and that was a blast.
Yeah. So now, when you were doing that, when you were helping with the women's team, you were so Goldman Sachs. Were you in New York at the time?
I was in Chicago.
In Chicago at the time.
Yep.
Chicago at the time, and so how would that work?
So I was flying, taking like leave on a Thursday afternoon and spend a long weekend in Colorado Springs, or take a week off. And I fortunately had some flexibility with my job, so I could take a lot of time and go out and work.
I'm putting that together. I'm like, man, that had to be tough. Working 15-hour days at Goldman Sachs, getting on a plane and coaching a bunch of athletes.
It was difficult, but it was rewarding. And working with the women's team was fantastic. I was a huge proponent of women's wrestling at the time, and still am today. And I think that what's happened and what we've seen in that sport and the growth of that sport is simply wonderful. Yeah. And it's wonderful not only for the girls and women that are participating, but it's wonderful for wrestling overall. So you think about the sport, what I always said to myself was I had learned and received a great deal from the sport of wrestling. So many things that the sport benefited me, gave me mobility. I ended up paying for my college education. I traveled around the world. And you learn a lot about yourself and the self-confidence you gain by being an athlete, all of those great things. To me, in my own mind, I'm saying to myself, why should this be denied to half the population? They can get the same thing out of the sport that men can, and they should. And so I wanted to contribute something to the women's program, and was fortunate enough to be able to coach the women's team at that level. And it was just amazing to work with some of those athletes and how dedicated they were, and how amazing they performed and how similar it was to coaching men from that perspective. How the work ethic and the learning and the competition and the intensity was really similar to the men, and so it was rewarding from that perspective. Yeah,
because you were like in the early stages of women's wrestling.
Yeah, well, you had Tricia McNaughton Saunders. Had been. If you think about who deserves credit for building and pioneering women's wrestling, she stands alone, head and shoulders above everybody else. She didn't walk through doors that later enabled women to walk through doors and compete. She kicked the doors down, or she built the doors. There was no women's wrestling before she came in. She was working with Art Martori in USA Wrestling, and Art was a big proponent of women's wrestling, but even Art didn't want to move as fast and do as much as she did, and she pushed Art, she pushed USA Wrestling. And sometimes you have to be a nuisance. You have to irritate people to get what you want, and she certainly did.
Wow.
And thank goodness that she did, because she moved USA Wrestling for women 5, 10, 20 years ahead of where it would be today if it weren't for her. So
I want to talk to her.
Yeah, she would be interesting to talk to, because you could get her perspective on the roadblocks that she faced from everybody, and me and everyone else included that didn't want to move as fast as she wanted to move, but she did move the needle, and just was a tremendous advocate for women's wrestling, and for her own opportunities, which she succeeded at.
Oh yeah.
So she stands alone as both in terms of her success, multiple-time world champion on the mat, and then off the mat, where she built the sport really brick by brick.
What was it like coaching with Terry Steiner?
Terry is great.
I love Terry.
So Terry,
he was at Iowa when I was there.
Yeah. So Terry's dedicated. So Terry is a North Dakota kid. Not quite as good as South Dakota, but North Dakota. And so we knew we had camps that we ran in Bismarck when Terry was a kid, and he and his brother came to our camp, rolled around a little bit. So we've known them a long time, and we've been fans of Terry and Troy. Because we want to see people from our area succeed, and they have succeeded. And Terry is he is very, very thoughtful. He's kind of quiet, maybe a little reserved, but he is a thoughtful coach. He's an intense coach, and he's a demanding coach. And so working with him and seeing him, how he worked with the ladies that were on the national team was great.
Yeah, well, what he's done with that women's program is just he's just done a fantastic
He's
job.
built that program and continue to see it succeed at a high level. And obviously Japan is a tremendous program because it's a cultural phenomenon over there, but he's competed very well with Japan. And, I think the day will come where, you see the numbers that are in our country now for women's sports that we're going to dominate. And I hope Terry coaches long enough to where we are winning, 7 gold medals in the Olympics, because I think we really have that capacity. Do they get 7 weights? They don't get 7 weights. They get
They get 7.
Yeah, they get 7.
Yeah, they get 7. Same as men.
Yeah. So I think we'll get to that level.
Yeah.
But here's the funny thing was, and sad thing was that when I told people, and when USA Wrestling announced that I was going to be working with the team, I had so many people call me or talk to me and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're working with the women's team. They don't, the way women shouldn't be wrestling."
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was amazing. And you just go back and think about the early 2000s, where not everybody thought women should be on the mat.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to hear this commentary. But what I thought to myself was, well, people said women shouldn't run marathons or shouldn't ride in bicycle races or shouldn't, play full court basketball, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And women have, sport by sport, proven that they should and can compete in those sports. And I said, so now when you hear somebody say, well, women, their constitutions aren't strong enough to run marathons, and so they shouldn't be running the marathon. Well, now, we laugh at that.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking of that to myself when I started coaching women. It was just like, well, people were laughing 20 or 30 years ago about women competing in the marathon. I mean, people were critical of women competing in the marathon 30 or 40 years ago. But now it's accepted because they've proven, and people laugh to think, well, people said women couldn't ride bicycles in sport or people couldn't run marathons. It's funny to us now because it's obviously evident that they can. And what I had thought at the time was in 30 or 40 years, people are gonna laugh at your commentary that you said women couldn't wrestle because it's not ladylike or they're gonna get too strong or this, that, or the other thing. Well, now everybody, I think, pretty much accepts that wrestling is great for women and would laugh to hear the commentary that I got back in 2005 when I started coaching women's wrestling.
Yeah, it's incredible how it's grown in the popularity. And you mentioned the Japanese, where it's very cultural there. I mean, is it? I mean, is it really like idolized in the Japanese culture there?
Well, it's obviously very, very popular. If you look at their teams, and the level of their teams, and the number of fans that they send to international competitions, the reception that these women get back home in Japan. I mean, they're national heroes.
Wow. Really?
Oh yeah. And I think it almost goes back to, I think, Japanese professional wrestling, where women were wrestling professionally in Japan and it was very popular. And then, they just sort of picked up on women should wrestle and would be very popular there. So my perception, and I've actually gone and been invited to do coaching seminars in Japan as part of UWW, and I've done that. My understanding, perception, and what I've viewed is that wrestling is culturally extremely popular in Japan for women.
Wow.
And that's why they're so successful at the international level.
Wow. Yeah, well, I tell you what, and their men's team has been
their men's
really well here recently.
Their men's team is
especially
picking
that last
up.
Olympics. My goodness, they were.
Yeah, amazing.
I mean,
it's good to see. You want to see wrestling develop and competition develop all across the globe. It's only better for wrestling and for us.
No, I thought it was great because there was a couple of years there when India was putting themselves on the map. They had really good, a bunch of good guys, and then you see it's cycling. I mean, obviously you're always going to have your normal players in there, but having a country like Japan really perform well here as of recent, it's really cool to see that. Yeah,
I think wrestling. This one of the things we spoke about when we were trying to convince the IOC to put wrestling back in the Olympics after it was taken out, was the strong benefit that wrestling has for women globally. We're creating upward mobility for athletes in India and in wrestling and other countries around the world where female wrestlers are using the sport to better their station in life. and also all female wrestlers across the world, regardless of the country. Wrestling is beneficial for them from a self-esteem perspective, from a self-confidence perspective, from a physical development perspective. It just has so many benefits. And it's one of the reasons why wrestling should be in the Olympics, is so that girls and women around the world can be inspired to compete in the sport.
Well, that's where our transition is going now, so we're going to wrap it up here. I mean, I'm literally sitting with one of the most influential people in the ones that, and one of the people that we could really have the most thanks towards for saving our saving the Olympic program in wrestling. So you chaired the committee of the CPOW.
So the Committee to Preserve Olympic Wrestling.
Okay. Yep.
CPOW.
A CPOW. All right. Explain all this, because I know we got into it a little bit before, but this is, I mean, like I said, Bill Scherr helped to save wrestling.
There are some lessons here I think people need to take to heart.
Right.
And because I don't think wrestling necessarily is where it needs to be. And where we want wrestling to be is to be one of the most popular sports in the world, and on a footing to where it can never be taken out of the Olympics again. So the lesson we've learned from when it was taken out of the Olympics should apply today. So we'll talk about why it was taken out, and then how we got it back in, and what we should be aware of going forward. So in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, 2005, the International Olympic Committee was trying to improve their sport programs. They're facing competition just like everybody else for eyeballs on the television and marketing dollars, et cetera. And they were competing against the X Games and other sport properties, and their demographics were aging in a way that wasn't necessarily good for them. So they went to every sport and they said, you need to improve the way your sport appears on television. You need to increase your television viewership, and you need to create better presentation of the sport so it plays better on TV. You also need to improve and develop your social media and build your social media. And by the way, you're getting money from the Olympic Committee every 4 years that you're running your sports programs on. We don't want to see you dependent on that. Raise your own money, build your own programs. We don't want you to only to depend on our money. And when I was campaigning for Chicago to be part of the Olympic Games, and when I was working for Chicago 2016, I met with every IOC member over a 3 or 4 year period of time, multiple times, as did my brother, who was the CEO of the U.S. Olympic Committee. And we both were getting the same message consistently. Wrestling is in trouble. Your federation is not complying with the IOC. They're not even filing their annual reports with the IOC.
Oh, wow.
They're not building the sport the way they need to.
We're talking about FILA at this time.
We're talking about FILA at this time. They're not building the sport the way they need to. So I conveyed this information to Rich Bender. Rich was very concerned. Rich arranged a meeting for me in 2010 in Moscow with Rafi Martinetti, the head of FILA. So I went to the World Championships. I met with Martinetti there, and he didn't share the same view I did. He felt we were not in any danger. Fast forward 3 short years later, wrestling didn't make any changes, and we were kicked out of the Olympics by the International Olympic Committee. And there was a vote of which sports they were going to pair out and kick out, and they took wrestling out and they left modern pentathlon in, which was kind of a slap in the face.
Yeah.
But you know the reasons why we were taken out. And there was a lot of politics behind the scenes, but we made ourselves vulnerable. And so the first thing we did was worked with Stan Desick, who was our FILA member, and Rich Bender, and we convinced FILA that they needed to get Martinetti out the door. And they replaced Martinetti with Nenad Lalovic, who's the current head of UWW. They changed the name to UWW. And that was the first step, because the IOC was not going to accept Martinetti. He was not respected well by many IOC members, and he was part of the problem of the past. So we replaced him. And then we set about changing the attitude, I think, of most of the U.S. folks who were involved. We put together this committee. Rich Bender did. Thank God for Rich and his quick actions during this time frame in USA Wrestling. My brother and I were on the committee. A lot of leaders from business, Mike Novogratz, John Bardis, other leaders from the sport of wrestling, Bruce Baumgartner, Dan Gable, many other wrestlers, Tom and Terry Brands, blah, 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 a lot of guys. And we were able to convince, my brother and I knew the game of the IOC, which is they are an entity unto themselves. They don't answer to any governments. They don't answer to any monetary pressure. They don't answer to any public criticism. They answer to themselves. And so we were able to convince the U.S. folks that, look, we can't go and attack the IOC. Stop writing Congress. Stop trying to get Congress to issue statements. Stop going on in the press and saying the IOC is terrible, et cetera. It's not going to do us any good. Instead, Jim flew to Europe, met with a number of IOC members who were influential, met with the chief of staff of Jacques Rogue, and we talked about a path that would allow the IOC to put wrestling back in, because they realized it was a mistake immediately. There was a huge outcry from 30 million wrestlers globally, and they quickly realized, look, we need to get wrestling back in, but how do we do it and save face? And the way that they told us we could do it was to have wrestling compete with the other, there were 7 or 8 other sports that were on the agenda to be put into the program to replace the sports that they had cut. Baseball, I think it was baseball, inline skating, a number of other sports that were in line to get put back into the program. And we were able to work with the IOC to say, okay, you guys compete against those other sports, and if you win, it's a nice way for us to save face and put wrestling back in the games. And then we, along with Russia and other folks, were able to lobby the IOC members over a 9-month period of time. We went to all the IOC meetings. We ended up going to Buenos Aires, where they were making this vote. My brother was on the presentation team, along with Lalovic and a few other athletes from around the globe. And we were able to convince the IOC to put wrestling back in, and we were successful. So that was a red letter day for wrestling that we were able to get them back in. And it was a path that we had to walk that could have gone astray if we made mistakes. Now, Japan was competing for the Olympics in 2020, and Russia wanted to have the Winter Olympics in Sochi, and so we were able, and they were able to negotiate some voting, and we got enough votes, and we won. So we put wrestling back in. But here's the lesson. We need to continue to promote the sport so that it appears good on TV, and that it's watchable for TV audience and fans. The presentation has to improve, has to continue to improve. The rules have to continue to be simplified so that people can understand it who don't know anything about it. And we have to continue to build, the social media, et cetera, so that we are creating a fan base so that when we do have the Olympics, I was somewhat disappointed in Paris, so we didn't get to see a lot of wrestling in prime time. And it wasn't shown. And so we want audiences to clamor for U.S. athletes. We want the popularity to be built, and we want the sport to be exciting on TV. So we've seen this thing. I'm a big fan of RAF, not necessarily because I think the wrestling is as great as it could be, but it's improving. But they're promoting the sport, and they're presenting it in a way in which it's exciting, and they're building excitement about the sport. They're building names and backgrounds for these athletes, and they're creating social media. And it's bringing attention to the sports. You may or may not like what they're doing. You may or may not like the athletes, et cetera, the matchups. But you have to credit them for building interest in the sport. And anything that does that is something that we should welcome as wrestling fans. Because we could still be taken out of the Olympics. There's a new methodology in which they select sports into the programs. There's a lot more decision-making at the local organizing committee level. So, for instance, Los Angeles is putting in flag football because it's in the United States. Oh. Right?
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and they're putting in lacrosse, which my brother's the CEO of the International Lacrosse Federation. They got in the Olympics. But, a local organizing committee decides they don't want wrestling. I think they do have the authority, in some ways to remove wrestling from the Olympics. So we need to be vigilant, continue to build the sport's popularity, and continue to drive the sport forward.
Yeah. I think wrestling is such a passionate sport. It's such a, it means so much to all the traditionalists and everything. So sometimes I think it's hard to, for them to wrap their arms around things that are just different. They're changing. But all you got to do is just go to an RAF event. I'm telling you, if you go and you see the reception from the fans. Yeah, it's. Because again, I was here at the one in Chicago, and I was fortunate enough to help Michael Chandler out in his match. But when him and Chad Mendez took the stage.
Yep. I was there.
Everybody knows them. They're going crazy, and it's just. There were some other matches on there that were probably that more interesting.
I was at the match in Tempe as well, and I think anything that builds interest in the sport, and we have a great interest at the college level where we have these college rivalries We have the tradition. Penn State wrestles Iowa, et cetera. You're going to get a lot of fans and eyeballs on the Big Ten Network, and that's all fine and well. But that does not translate into broader appeal for wrestling from an Olympic audience. And we need to continue to figure out ways to build that.
Yeah.
Make the rules more simple. We can still do more on that.
100%.
I mean, I look at the matches now and I have a hard time following what the rules are. We made it like that guy scored because he didn't score in 30 seconds or he did score in 30 seconds. I don't get this. Let's keep simplifying the rules, make it exciting for the fans and easy to understand, and create a presentation like RAF is doing that's fun to watch on TV. And
one of the things that REF's done that I think is really cool and that I think helps with what you just said is they have taken out, for the most part, the challenges. And they don't have they didn't allow for challenges for a while, because I think that's one of the things that, I was just at our P&L event last weekend, and that's the one thing. I mean, it's just like, you throw a brick and then all of a sudden it's 10, 15 minutes. We're still trying to figure out, like, how in the world does it take 15 minutes for us to figure out how we scored that right there?
Yeah, look,
and you go to a football game and it's like literally, boom, 3 seconds and it's done.
I got my head chopped off on social media because I said, look, I was just at the NCAA wrestling tournament. And it was too long. It was too painful. They had all these challenges, and it was literally 4 hours, 3.5 hours for the finals. Now, if you're a traditional college wrestling fan, you don't mind, you don't care, whatever. But just assume we don't need to aim wrestling at the traditional wrestling fan.
We got them.
We got them. We if you're a Penn State, you're a Penn State diehard, and you don't mind the challenges being thrown out, great. You don't matter. We have you.
Yeah.
What matters are the people that have never seen wrestling that we want to try to attract to the sport. And I'm telling you, if you throw out 5 red bricks in 2 matches and you're sitting there for 20 minutes with nothing to do, they're not going to stay and watch that broadcast.
No way. Not a new fan. They
not
won't.
A new fan.
I mean, especially somebody that's flipping through the channels and watching it on ESPN, which the coverage is amazing now.
Yeah,
but it's just like, they're flipping through and they see, one. I mean, we got some really boring aspects of our folk style sport. I don't want to get into that, but just the challenge alone. I mean, they're like, wait a second, they challenge, and they're waiting around, and then they go to the intermission and go to a commercial, and all of a sudden they're still challenging. It's like, what are we doing here?
Put a 30-second time limit on the decision for the challenge. 30 seconds. I mean, any more, and then the other thing that happens is the athlete, the coach. If you're a smart coach and your athlete's getting tired, throw the challenge brick out. Yeah. Give him 2-3 minutes to rest.
Exactly it. Right? It's a coaching technique now.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway,
no, but I totally agree with you. But like I said, I mean, it's really cool, like, getting the insight there on not only what happened there in 2013, but also like what we've got to do to be proactive from a sport to make sure it just doesn't happen again. I think that's something that people really have to pay attention to. Maybe, like I said, maybe some of the RAF matches aren't really your thing, but at the end of the day, you might want to support it because at the end of the day, it's helping in the grand scheme of things. So,
I'm not going to be critical of anything that helps promote the sport.
Yep.
Now, I don't care how you do it. Some people, I don't like, AJ Ferrari because he looks like a dork doing the splits, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? He has a social media following.
Huge.
Yeah, and people like to follow him. Controversy, whatever. Any publicity generally is good publicity. Yep. So you know what? I mean, these kids that now they have a little more personality. They're posting on social media. I'm all for it. You know, I'm not one of these guys that traditional. These kids do this, that, the other thing. And they're not as good as we were. First of all, they're better than we were. They're better than we ever dreamed of being. Number one, and number two, you know what? They promote the sport better than we did. So. Keep doing it. Keep doing your stuff, guys.
Yeah, I like it. We're getting back into your area with one more little tidbit. I always like to hear, and this is kind of what I've heard. I mean, I started this podcast just to hear these type of things. But what's a really, really like either an oh wow or a super funny story, whether it be domestically, internationally, or just any of the world teams that you've been on, or college, like a college one? What's one that immediately comes to mind?
Well. Funny in a sad way. So we're freshmen at the University of Nebraska, me and Jim and Mark Manning. And of course, we're poorest church mice from South Dakota. We have no money. So we decided we want to go to spring break. And we're going to go on this, I think, Athletes in Action trip. And they had you got to raise a certain amount of money. So we're trying to raise this money. So we decided we're going to sell blood. So we go to the local blood bank, and me and Jim and Mark, we're going to sell blood. So what they do, they don't take all your blood, right? They take whatever out of your plasma, and then they spin it. They take your plasma out, they spin it, and then they put it back in you, right? And then you go on. They take whatever they wanted out of your blood.
Yeah.
Well, Mark forgets to get his plasma put back in. So we go to practice that afternoon, and and unfortunately Coach Fears picked that day to work out with Mark. And I don't think Mark could literally stand up during the practice. That was not one of Mark's better days. But that's a story that, you know, trying to raise a little extra money, not always the best strategy.
Well, you've obviously, you know, figured out how to raise money moving forward. You've a very successful life, and we are we're so fortunate to have people like you in our sport that's not only, you know, has given back and has done the things you have, but consistently looks out for our sport. So with that being said, Bill, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure. I enjoy these podcasts and snippets I see on the internet, so keep doing it.
Well,
thank you.
You're going to be part of one soon.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, thanks.
Awesome.
That was great.